And yeah, let's take a listen to this next section now.
But I really mean it, though you don't feel it every day. You those who hate me, you captivate me. I hear you fight me. Amidst the sound of rain falling down on streets that are at least all reconciled, although reviled, just for a moment. My lips, they fail you, my sweat, it seeps through, it stays in this room.
So yeah, for this first part again, I just cut everything out, let the vocal reverb out, and then I bring in this cello.
Feel it every day. You those who hate me.
And then I let it hit you, right? And yeah, cello is probably the instrument that's nearest and dearest to me because I actually played cello for a very long time. But unfortunately, I didn't have a cello at home or anything that I could use to record my own. So this is already a pre-recorded sample. But I mean, still, you know, having the cello in there's nice regardless. So here's how that just sample playing the MIDI sounds on its own. And again, tell me if the 5/4 time signature sounds kind of wonky or if it does sound like, you know, not strange, right? And if we're talking about the processing on here, first thing is a ton of Air. If you don't know Air, Air is a plugin by Air Windows, and he has a ton and a ton and a ton of plugins. I've only checked out like 0.5% of them. In fact, I was going in alphabetical order, which is why the one that I'm using is Air. You can see that I didn't get super far with looking at his plugins, but this one really stood out to me because it just helps make things brighter in a way that I think sounds really pleasing. In many cases, I prefer it over using no TT or an EQ. And the interesting thing about his plugins is that they have no interface. It's just knobs. But this one's really easy because I just turn these up depending on how much air I want to add. And I almost never turn them up this much. So this one I wanted to add a ton of air to. So again, before. And then after. But I mean, you can hear the difference. Then I've got distortion for the same reason that I was talking about earlier, just to kind of smoothen the dynamics a bit and bring it up, not really for actual like distortion. It's not even making a very big difference here. And then finally, reverb, of course. And you should have noticed by now that I use Valhalla Supermassive for the vast majority of my reverb. If you're unfamiliar, it's a free reverb. And I mean, you can hear it here. I think it has a very, very lovely sound, which is why I use it so often. And yeah, I mean, with just that processing, we turn this into this. You know, make it very polished. Now let's talk about the rest of these elements here. I'm going to come back to the drums in a moment, because the rest of these are basically the same. It's just that I've cut them so that when the rim, in that moment between the rim and the kick, there's nothing playing, aside from the cello and the vocals, because really those are the two main focuses, or the three, the drums, the vocals, and the cello. And you'll notice that this bass is much more aggressive than the one from the beginning. And it's the same patch though. I just turned this filter way up so that much more of the highs are coming through. so that it has more impact, because I mean the first part's chill and this part is still chill, but I want it to have more impact than the beginning. Then I've got this brass. Same one from the first chorus, so I don't need to talk about that. And then it's the same ambience from the first chorus, except it's just chopped up. And I've got the MIDI here, so we can take a look at that as well. And this is the same MIDI from the first verse. So nothing in terms of the chord progression is new there. We're still resolving at the very end, but nowhere else. And then we've got, of course, this impact. And of course, I want the vocals to be way louder than everything else so that you can actually hear what he's saying. And yeah, here's what I was talking about with the fruity balance, automating the volume throughout. But I don't need to talk about the vocals because the processing is the same as before.
Dear those who hate me, you captivate me. I hear you fight me.
So let's talk about these drums. Let's start with the drum, like the pattern up here. And yeah, we're back to 5/4 for this next verse. So this was an interesting thing in the creation of this remix was how do I make a drum pattern that doesn't sound too weird in 5/4, because the original didn't have any drums, so I couldn't really go off of that, and then I settled with this. Which definitely still sounds strange just because it's in 5/4, but at least, again, maybe it's just me because I'm used to it, but I definitely think it's not too hard to get into. And then this kick is just a cymatic sample pitched up too, because this is in C and we're in D, but also, you know, distorting it a bit. And the reason why I wanted to leave these for last is because when I want to talk about what's in here, but I got to open up another project file first. So I'm going to open that here. I'll cut it in the video and we'll be in the next project file. All right, boom, just like magic, we're already here. And let's, yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of layers in here. First of all, there's ones in the actual pattern. This is where the rim is, so let's break these down. First is the actual rim. That's the first layer, which is, this one's from the direct pack, of course. If I take off the processing, you can see it's a pretty big difference between and if we take a look at this, this is actually interesting. So I've got two lanes here, the dry and the wet, but I actually pitched it down going into the wet so that I could get a unique tone for the reverb, which I think is pretty cool. So that's why the reverb kind of sounds like it's coming from a different rim than the one that's playing, is because I actually pitch shifted it going into that reverb. Then we've got another rim. It's not just that. And without this. And of course, we want to have, you know, a ton of reverb on these. So together, you know, you can hear what that one's doing. We've got this clap here, and this one's actually from an Alan Moore, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Sorry if I'm wrong, but Alan Moore pack. And his stuff is crazy because it has so much texture, which, I mean, is what I was looking for here. I mean, just listen to that texture, even without any of the processing. Still a ton of texture. Right? And then now I've got some perks over here that I can talk about. No processing on them or anything, just layering. And these are all, or at least almost all, from Direct's other pack. He's put out 2 sample packs. I got them both. And yeah, let's just play each of them. So these are all just to add texture. So without them. and then with them. So you can hear, I mean, it's not a huge difference, but a difference nonetheless. But that's not all. That's just in the pattern. We've got so much stuff in here. So if we're taking a look at this Alan Moore pack, again, a ton of texture. And if we look at the processing on most of these, yeah, it's just a bit of EQ and turned way down because there's a lot of them. So I'm not going to worry about the processing. Plus, even if I had processed each of these a lot, talking about all of these would take way too long. So yeah, here's the first one. Again, Alan Moore pack, just because this originally sounds like this. But I wanted to get rid of the clap, so I just took the beginning and the tail. You can see I cut it up. Then we've got this one, same deal. Again, same pack and same thing of cutting out the actual like hit. Then we've got this one. And yeah, actually same pack. Same exact process. Then we've got this one. Again, same pack. And as you can tell, I mean, Alan Moore, if you haven't heard his stuff, definitely check it out or check out the ones that are at least still left online, because the amount of texture and detail in his music is actually ridiculous. And even in just the samples that he puts out, it's crazy. So that was extremely helpful here in getting the sound I wanted. Again, same pack. Still same pack. So much good stuff in there. Still the same pack. This one's actually different though. This one's from the direct pack. It's just a water splash sample for more texture. Gotta get that wet sound, you know. And then this one, which is also from the direct pack. And this one I pitched down 6 semitones. Again, just more texture. So this whole thing is really just taking a ton of samples, mostly from the direct and Alan Moore packs, and putting them together in, and I don't know if I had said this yet, but yeah, I had originally made this in another project file when I was working on something else. But when I was in the remix, I was like, I want a really, really textured rim. I know I have one here. So I went into here and I exported it and then dragged it into the other project, which is why, you know, it's in here and then it ended up in the actual remix. So with all of it together, that rim sounds like this. So much texture, and is definitely the most textured sound that I've ever put together. But it doesn't quite sound like that in the remix. So now we're going to go back into the remix project file and take a look at how I processed it. Because yeah, I did even more stuff than just the stuff in this project file here. Alright, and boom, just like magic, we're already back in the project file. So yeah, I exported it in 2 parts, just the texture and just the rim. Because I wanted to process them separately, because without the processing, this is what it sounds like. This is what it sounded like in that other project file we were just looking at. And this is what it ended up sounding like when in the final version of this. So you can definitely hear that there's quite a difference. So let's talk about how I process the texture first. This is literally just no TT. So nothing too crazy there without it. But since it's compression, it's bringing up, like, if the input gain's quiet, the output gain is going to be louder, so it actually makes it sound even more textured, which is just splendid, right? And then when we're looking at the rim without it, anything, and then if we're looking at what I added, first things first, our good friend that we met not too long ago, Air, as you can, these settings are more realistic for me. These are more like the usual ones that I put around like the 50s and 60s, and you can hear the difference before and after. Right, really brings the high end out. Then this EQ, nothing too noteworthy, just a low cut. And then this wave shaper just bringing the whole thing up. So without it, and then with. Right, not a huge difference, but definitely noticeable. And then together. So I mean, yeah, of all the things in this project file, this definitely, I mean, I don't know if it has the most amount of stuff behind it, but it definitely could be the one with the most amount of stuff behind it, because I mean, the amount of like layers and stuff, this one at least took quite a journey from 2 full project files just to end up in this remix. So yeah, let's play it one more time.
Hear those who hate me, you captivate me. I hear you fight me. Amidst the sound of rain falling down on streets that are valleys. All reconciled, although reviled, just for a moment. My lips, they fail you, my sweat, it seeps through, it stays in this room.
Now we're going into the chorus, and of course another time signature change from 5 to 6. And I wonder if it's more noticeable now for you guys as the listeners, since there's drums here.
It seeps through, it stays in this room. But I'm
Okay, let's talk about this. First things first, drum pattern changes. We go from having, these kicks do this wild stuff to the simplest pattern possible, right? We've just got the kick at the beginning and the snare in the middle, or the rim in the middle, I should say. And I've got this ride playing. I didn't want to have any rides or any hats in the 5/4 section, because I feel like when you have like dun 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 dun, but it only goes for 5, it might throw you off. So I wanted to avoid that. And yeah, for the perks, it's just reverb as far as the processing goes. So that's all. And the actual sample itself is cymatics. I know we've mostly seen cymatics for the life stuff, but as far as my drums go, a lot of my drums are from there. So we've got that. Rim still the same as before, except it's spaced out 1 extra beat between each other, because now we're in 6/4 instead of 5/4. And then these 3 other ones that you saw that were muted, by the way, first, I've pitched this one down 6. But first of all, these are all just cymatics. Actually, not all of them. This one is from the Cashmere pack. But the reason why I rendered them out was because, and this is not anything that I had actually ever thought of before. I can't think of any song that's done this, but I'm sure it's been done by someone at some point. But something really interesting that I ended up doing with this is that I exported the hats, and then what I did was I pitched them down. And you'll hear what that sounds like here. And if you've heard the remix, that should sound familiar, because that's actually exactly what's going on right here. But that actually goes on throughout the entirety of the chorus. But I do have the ride layered in here to keep some of that high end. So it's not as noticeable than just this, because it doesn't get muffled, but it's still definitely noticeable. So you can definitely hear that timbral change. Vocals, still same as always.
but I mean, every word I say.
Right? Very, very nice vocals from No Matter. Very, very nice. Then we've got the bass. Don't need to talk about this. It's still the same, more aggressive bass from this part, the part right before it, but now it's playing the chorus notes. And yeah, I believe all of this, actually, there's one difference that I'll talk about right now. All of this stuff is the same as earlier, except when I talked about that huge tease from the first time, where I was like, remember when when I was talking about how if you had just brought in this extra note, you would have been resolved, or the melody would have gotten resolved? Well, I did that this time, except not fully. So I didn't want to keep, you on edge so much as this. Where it just doesn't resolve at all, like in the first chorus. But I also thought it's too soon to do the full resolution where you play the full one chord. Right, like that's when we're on the biggest climax where it's like, okay, finally we're letting out all this tension. So I went in the middle where these two, technically this is the one chord, but these two are just going to continue playing from before, and this one switches. So it's like, it's technically a resolution, but not the full satisfaction yet, so that I can still get that full satisfaction when I actually want it. Notice how it does resolve, but not in such a conclusive way as if I had brought in those two notes again, right? Hopefully that makes sense. But aside from that, the rest of the thing's the same. It's just resolves in here. And the reason why it is muted, I'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, I can go through. I mean, I know I spent a very long time in this first part, but luckily the second half's faster because this second chorus is basically identical to the first one, except with drums and with this ending. So this is the same. This is the same. This is the same. Also, there's one other difference. It has the cello now. And not only a cello, but I actually layered it with two violins. And these, again, are just pre-recorded samples. If you're wondering where I got them from, this. No Budget Orchestra has these in particular. And I got all of these from someplace because they're all free, but I don't remember, unfortunately. But yeah, same processing on the violin as the cello. Without it, it sounds like this. So really just making it much more grandiose. And then even quieter, because you see this solo cello is the loudest, and then this one's much quieter, and then this one's even quieter, is an even higher version of the violin. And you can see that as this one goes up, this one goes down, because if I went even higher, you'll notice how it can get to the pretty, grating territory. Like, nah, that's way too high, so that's much more tolerable. And then all together. Right? So let's play this one more time. But yeah, I think it sounds lovely and realistic because these are actual real instruments. Like, yeah, they're not really it's not a recording of the instrument playing this whole like melody. I mean, it's repitching an actual recording of the instrument. So I mean, that's got to count for something, right? And then of course all this ambience and this impact, same as last time. And the pads. Very nice cushion. Except one difference, I made these birds, actually both of these birds, much louder in the original one. And then now, or at least I made this one much louder. I wanted to just add to the ambience here, and I do want it to just add to the ambience here, but I also want it to stick out a little bit more. So with everything else, it's not like super loud, but it's definitely much louder than in here. So then all together,
stays in this room, but I'm every word I say, I just can't clear my head inside away. 'Cause sometimes love says what I'm thinking of, in other words stay tucked away. But I really mean it, and you don't feel it every day.
and you can see that my CPU is kind of struggling with this one, and this is with ozone off and the smart disable on, because I mean, when I'm doing with OBS, the CPU has to kind of handle a lot, which is why I had to make some of the adjustments. And the original's a lovely song, so I kind of wanted to I wanted to keep that from the original, but with my own production and my own kind of twist on it, but definitely the same feeling that the original was going for.
But I'm every word I say, I just can't clear my head and send it away.
And while the vocals are definitely still audible, I wasn't as worried about making the lyrics very clear, just because you can already tell what they are from the first chorus, and since you're already familiar with it, then your brain kind of does more of the work for you than it would in the verse when everything's new.
In this room, but I'm
And the other thing that I realized that I haven't talked about yet, even though it's been earlier in the remix, is this. I mean, there's not really much to say about it, just acknowledging the fact that the sub and the bass slide up pretty high. And that's something that I like to do as well, a lot. I mean, especially in Restless, you've heard it a lot, but even in some of the ones that I'm working on, and probably in some of the ones that I've released already, it's definitely there. And that's about it for the second chorus, aside from this very end. So this, you can see it's all muted just because I exported it here, because I wanted to just get the reverb tail, and I wanted to filter it. Well, this first part's not the reverb tail, but I wanted like everything here to be just the reverb tail. And the easiest way for me to do that was to render it out. And I think that, getting that filtering, not only filtering the highs down, but also getting rid of some of the lows, really helps to bring us into the next section and take us out of this one. Right, so we've got that. We've also got this reverse into the next bass. Very, very short but effective. And then here, this is literally just what I was doing already, except more extreme, pitching it down. So with everything else,
see the walls, I can't see the walls.
All right, let's talk about what's going on here. Vocals still the same as normal. And actually this one's interesting because this first bit's in 5/4, but this second bit, which is still in like that same like bridge section, I guess you could call it, before we get into the big part that those of you, I mean, I'm assuming you've heard the remix. So you know what big part I'm talking about. But yeah, this very first beginning bit of the bridge is in 5/4, but then the rest of it's in 6/4. And at least to me, that time signature change is not noticeable. But I don't know if, maybe that's just because I'm used to it or if it's really not noticeable. All right, so now for this bass. Yeah, it's literally just playing the same note for the entirety of this first bit until here, where it goes one down. And I'll talk about the notes when I talk about the chords, which is when I talk about the piano. Right now I'm just going to talk about the sound itself, how I made it. And this, without any processing, sounds like this. It's an I can has kick, again, a serum wavetable in phase plant with the envelope turned down so that it's actually plucking. And I'm not changing the frame or anything, that's constant. And let me just turn these off one by one so that I can turn them on one by one. Then first things first, distortion. Then filter to actually get some like filtered pluckiness. So you can see that that's already making a big difference. No TT because, I mean, of course. If it's a sound, it's going to have no TT on it. And then finally, a bit of bit crushing to give it more texture. And you can hear the difference that that makes without it. And then with. Right? So that's that. As far as like the bass sound, I mean, it's literally just one wavetable, so that's not too complicated. It's just a bit of processing and getting the right kind of timbre out of it. All right, now let's talk about this piano. It's still the same piano as always, but I want to talk about the chords more specifically. Because this is definitely the most interesting and complex part of the whole remix in terms of the chord progression. Because I can actually set this, if you're unfamiliar with FL Studio, I can actually set this so that it shows which notes are in D major. I've got it set to C minor for another project that I've got right now. But basically, all the ones that are light are in key, and all the ones that are dark, you see like these lines in the background, all the light ones are in key, all the dark ones are out of key. So you can see this A sharp, that's not in key. This D sharp, that's not in key. And this F is not in key either. So when I play this chord progression, it's going to sound very dissonant and very dystopian. Right? And I mean, we don't hit the root chord, but we don't even get close to it. When the chords are so weird like this, where, you start to question what kind of key you're even in, then when we hit you with that resolution, it's going to be all that much more powerful, and we're getting close to it. So getting all that dissonant energy in will juxtapose so much more strongly with that resolution when it comes in, to get the maximum effect possible. So when we're talking about why did I do the chords this weird, I mean, if the vocal was weird, I would definitely be doing the chords weird. But if we play it with the vocal is completely in key. The chords underneath it are not, well, most of them are not. And also, let me talk about this one as well. Right, that's normal. And then that's weird. I mean, I could talk about like the specific types of borrowing that it's doing, but that doesn't really matter. But when I play with the vocals,
See the walls. I can't see the walls. Grope for bricks, reach for sticks, hoping one of them bears the load. 'Cause I can't see them all. I can't see them at all.
So these chords are carefully chosen to use notes from outside the key, but not clash with the vocals. And this is definitely the most uneasy part of the whole, not even of the whole remix, but of the original track. This is definitely the most uneasy part. So I wanted to play into that as much as possible. And choosing your chords wisely is an extremely powerful tool to do that with. And that's exactly what I aim to do here. And that's why I'm coming in with all these strange and unfamiliar chords. And the most dissonant one of all is definitely that last chord, because that doesn't really match with the vocal.
At all.
Like if you hear what the vocal's playing, that's an E. This chord is playing a D sharp. And I mean, I could just tell you right now, if you hear if I play E and D sharp together, that's not very pleasant, right? That's very, very dissonant, and that's exactly what the chords are doing with the vocal here. Because like the rest of the ones, they're outside the key, but they aren't explicitly clashing with the vocal, but this one is. And if we take a look at what this bass is playing, it's actually okay. Also, this is just the same bass as before, but I made a new version of it so that it's more sustained. But now, and I didn't even realize that I did this before going into this breakdown, but here we've got the vocal playing E at the, well, it's just playing E. Then we've got D sharp at the top of the chords, and then we've got D in the bass. So not only do we have that D sharp E clash, but we've also got that D sharp D clash. So, I mean, now that is pretty dissonant. Melodically, not very pleasing, which you would think means bad, but again, we're playing the long game here. When we make it not pleasing, then the pleasing part just becomes so much more satisfying. This ambience is the same. No birds, though. It's the same as this. And then the pads are playing this new chord progression. Right? Nailing down that dissonance as much as possible. And then this is kind of interesting. Let me play these. So there's two layers. Here's the first one. I know it sounds pretty weird, right? So without any processing, it sounds like this. Which is way different from this. That's not even like recognizable as the beginning. So what it starts with doesn't really matter. This first thing is Fracture. It's a free glitch plugin, although I rarely ever use it. In fact, I mean I had it on my old computer, but when I switched, not all the plugins got switched over, so I didn't have it here. So I got it specifically for this tiny little element of the remix. And again, it's free and whatnot, and you can tell how much it completely transformed the sound from this to this. I mean, it makes glitches really easy, and you can tell that those glitches have pitches that aren't in the key, so that's just adding to the dissonance that I've already created. Then we've got this kilohertz stereo, which is just getting rid of all the width. I want it to be completely mono. And then getting rid of the lows, adding some high end and fruity balance, because as you can see, when I hit stop, it still keeps going. So I want that fruity balance to make sure that it actually stops when I want it to. So yeah, that's how this one sounds. And the other thing is that this is random, so this is going to sound different every single time I play it. But I mean, it still sounds consistent enough to where that's not a problem. And then this is a cymatics effect, and this actually has no processing on it. I think this might be the first, well, maybe not the first, but at least the first time that I've noticed one in this remix that actually isn't being processed by anything. So this just sounds like this. And then this second half is the same as the first one, but reversed. And you could tell that this actually sounds like, surprisingly, like this sample that happened to be in a cymatics pack sounds really similar to what I made out of something that's not even remotely close to it. So, you know, they blend pretty nicely together. And again, that's just adding to the dissonance that I've already created with all this other stuff. And that dissonance helps to add a lot of tension. Because in this part, I mean, I haven't actually talked about the lyrics yet. Mainly because I didn't write the lyrics. I mean, that's not anything that I had any part in creating. But the lyrics definitely influenced my production choices.
I can't see the walls. Grope for bricks, reach for sticks, hoping one of them bears the load. 'Cause I can't see them all. I can't see them at all.
I mean, that's definitely not, like, lyrically, that's definitely not a super resolved lyrical message. So it's not just me being like, oh, I want to make this, you know, super, super dissonant for no reason. This actually, you know, this is actually coming from the original and wanting to amplify the mood of this bridge as much as possible.
See the walls. I can't see the walls. Grope for bricks, reach for sticks, hoping one of them bears the load. 'Cause I can't see them all. I can't see them at all.
And then here I cut everything out, and it's just the tail of the vocal and the other reverb tails. And then let's listen to this next bit.
You're just gonna have to trust me. Trust me.
So originally, this is almost inaudible. Like, it's definitely audible in the original track, but even in the original track, it's much quieter. Like, I really wanted you to hear this.
You're just gonna have to trust me. Trust me.